You wake to the faintest hush before dawn. The air in the atrium Vestae is cool against your skin and sharp with the scent of damp stone and olive oil. As you sit up on your simple couch, the marble floors glow faintly in the moon's retreating light. The small central pool catches that glow like a secret held in cupped hands. You breathe in the stillness that belongs to you and your sisters alone. The city is not awake yet. The merchants are not yet shouting their prices in the forum. The senators are not yet wrapped in their togas like arguments in human form. As your bare feet find the ground, you feel a familiar shiver of purpose climb your spine. The fire has burned through the night. You must go to it. You must see it. You must keep it breathing. The life of the city and the life you swore to live are both bound to that quiet living core of heat. You move with the soft-footed certainty of someone who knows that every doorway here opens to a duty, every corridor leads to a vow. As you dress, you lay the layers with practiced care. Your stola and palla are arranged modestly, yet with a dignity that is not yours alone but belongs to the office you carry. You place the infole, the white woolen bands, so their tails fall against your shoulders like twin reminders. Purity is not a decoration but a discipline. You pull across your head the suffibulum, the white mantle that transforms a woman into a vessel for sacred work. Your hair, arranged in the semi-crines, is parted and braided with the solemn pattern of brides. Your marriage is to duty and fire and the state itself. It is tight enough to ache in a way that feels like identity. You step out into the cool, winding path that takes you from the house of the Vestals across the open space to the round temple where your day truly begins. You feel the earth of Rome underfoot, that packed and storied ground where generations have traded, pleaded, vowed and betrayed, where emperors have ridden and children have watched wide-eyed from the edges. As you pass, you sense the eyes of the night watch, respectful and silent. They catch in the lamplight the white brightness of your veil. The round temple waits ahead, Vesta's house, your charge, your heartbeat. At the threshold you pause and draw a breath. This is the moment of crossing. This is the line between the world of people and the hearth of a goddess. You step inside and the air changes. It is cooler, holistic, close with the smell of clean ash and old cedar and the faint iron-sweet hint of smoke. At the center the flame glows in its shallow basin, flickering slow and steady, like the quiet breath of a sleeping city that trusts you to keep it warm. You go to your knees in the rhythm carved into you by years of repetition. You make the small offerings that have meaning not because they are elaborate but because they are correct. You feed the fire gently, not flooding it with fuel but nursing it like a living creature that must never be frightened. If the flame goes out, if the flame falters, Rome shudders in dread. The city begins to count its omens backward, as if the gods have turned their faces away. You put to the ember the splintered kindling and the carefully dried twigs that crackle like tiny promises kept. You watch the orange take brighter hold. You feel the temperature lift, the glow sliding across your hands like a blessing that burns only in metaphor. You whisper the words you have known since childhood, words you learned when you were still small enough to be led by the hand into rooms that frightened you, not because they were dark, but because they were holy. You were 6 when you came here, chosen by the Pontifex Maximus with the solemnity of those who handle not the living but the sacred. Your name rose from a list of girls unblemished by misfortune and birthmarks and orphanhood. On the day you left your father's house, you remember a door closing more heavily than it should have, as if the wood itself knew that it would be years before you crossed that kind of threshold again. Your mother's eyes were bright with salt and pride. Your father stood stiffer than his usual granite. While you were freed from his protesters, while the law declared you a daughter of the state now, he still felt the pull of the invisible rope between parent and child. Yet he could not deny that to be called by the goddess was a fate that put a wreath on his name and a chain of invisible expectation on your shoulders that no one else could carry for you. You live now in a house where time is divided into learning, doing, teaching. 10 years to memorize and practice without error. 10 years to perform the rites like a heartbeat you never forget. 10 years to instruct the novices whose eyes carry the same mix of fear and wonder that you remember in your own. Every day is a circle, not unlike the temple itself, where beginnings and ends meet. You hold the circle intact. If you fail, you do not fail alone, for this is not work that allows for private mistakes. That is why the punishments for transgression are spoken of in whispers, not to embellish fear, but to keep it drawn like a blade that should never have to be unsheathed. You know that a sister who breaks her vow does not spill blood before the city, yet the ground takes her, and the earth keeps secrets that stones remember for generations. The place where that happens is not one you look at when you pass, though you could draw its boundary with your eyes closed if you had to. You do not dwell there, you dwell here, in a morning thickening with light as the first sounds of the forum sneak into your world. A bark of a dog, a cart's wheel biting a rut, a vendor clearing his throat into the sunrise as if to announce a performance. You stand and make the quick signs that seal this moment and say that the day is in motion now. You cross to the small alcove where the tools are kept, bronze and wood and clay sit in neat order like the instruments in a musician's case. You set aside what you will need to prepare the mola salsa later. Rites today will require it, as they do on many days. It is a task that ties you to wives and mothers across the city who bake bread and grind grain, except that your hands work with ritual rather than recipe. Your Emma is destined for the bite of the sacrificial beast instead of a child's hunger. The novices arrive on the edge of the hour like new light. Their steps are careful, their eyes eager in a way that makes you feel the warmness of teaching unfurl in your chest. You give them their tasks softly but with the authority that you carry like a mantle. You remind one to check the level of sacred water in the earthen vessels. Water must be clean and untouched by iron to be acceptable. You remind another to sweep the threshold with the right-hand strokes that matter, because nothing is random here. You set one to watch the flame with the stillness of a cat. A single absent breath can be disaster. You guide two of them to the small grinding area. You show them the handful of far, the emmer that will become more than flour. You will roast it lightly in a clean pan and crush it with salt until it has the right feel between fingers and the right scent. Then you will put it aside in the vessel that is used only for this and nothing else. When the popa calls for it at the altar later, your hand can rise without thinking, and the goddess will be honored by the light fall of it on the victim's brow. At mid-morning you step out with your veil drawn and your lictor ahead of you like a declaration. His staff and presence are more for the crowd than for you. The law gives you a lane through the city. People know to part not because you command it, but because you represent something older than command. As you cross the forum, you feel the way sound thickens and then softens around you. The calls quiet for a beat. The chatter leans into a hum. The sight of a vestal is both common and rare. Common in that you walk here often, rare in that most people never see you this close. The veil stark as snow. The face behind it not yours alone but the face of every sister who ever kept the flame. As you move, a woman lifts her child to see. A man bows his head a fraction. A seller pauses in mid-shout. You walk through it like a knife slipping through oil, not cutting, only dividing and rejoining what must be parted for you. You feel the peculiar weight of honor that always sits next to the pressure of expectation. A small commotion ahead turns the air into a question, the kind of ripple that starts in the throat and moves to the eyes before it reaches the feet. Your lictor lifts his staff in warning. A cluster of people parts to reveal a man bound and flanked by guards. The rope at his wrists is a short sentence in fiber. The set of his mouth is the punctuation of someone who has already rehearsed the end of his day. For a heartbeat, the world holds its breath. There is a tradition older than most faces here. If a condemned man by chance meets a vestal, and you see him, and you say that the meeting was not contrived, then mercy can fall like rain where there was only dust. You feel the sharpness of that power, less a sword than a sudden summer. His eyes lock onto you. The guards glance to your veil. You step one pace closer and say the words that your office allows. This meeting is by chance. The goddess saw fit to cross your paths. The rope slackens. The air releases. The man's shoulders crumple into a shape that is not quite relief but the beginning of it. You do not wait for thanks. The fire waits and your time is not your own. But as you pass, you feel the city change by a grain, as if a single stone were slipped from the old scale of justice and the balance found a new poise. By noon, the temple hums with the low activity of a summer hive. You stand by the altar with the mola salsa in your hand. The ground grain and salt are cool against your skin as the officiants prepare the victim for sacrifice. Not a spectacle here, not a roaring crowd with blades and banners, but a precise ritual whose meaning folds into civic peace like spice into wine. When the moment comes, you step forward with the same soft authority that carries you through doors. Your arm lifts in a motion taut and retaught until it has become part of the muscle's own memory. You let the fine mix fall like snow on a shoulder and brow. The crystals of salt catch light for a heartbeat, as if blessing it with the reflection of the sun. The small cut is made. The auspices are read by eyes trained to find meaning in heat and steam and the language of entrails. A grammar alive since the city was a cluster of huts on a bend of river. You stand as still as stone through it, because your stillness is part of the rite. When it is done and the nod comes and the smoke begins its thin, clean climb, you know that the city has received the answer it asked for, or at least believes it has, which in Rome is rarely a different thing. Afternoon stretches out like a cloak shaken over shoulders, full of slow warmth and the murmurs of business drifting up from the forum like incense in reverse. You return to the house of the Vestals to take up work that is quieter but no less sacred. You slip into the weaving room where light falls across the looms in long pale strips. The warp and weft wait like strings before a performance. You take your place with another of your sisters to work the wool that will become the simple pure cloth used in rites throughout the year. The goddess is not fed and honored only with fire and flour, but also dressed and framed in the human gestures of care. The line of your shuttle becomes a metronome for your thoughts. Each pass carries with it a memory of your first clumsy lines, of your teacher's voice reminding you that uneven tension makes a fabric that fails under strain, of the way a whole city depends quietly on the evenness of hands they never see. You think, as you often do, that there is a strange harmony in the fact that your life is both terribly narrow and impossibly wide. When the heat of the day climbs its last few steps and then begins to exhale, you take the novices into the shaded court. The laurel and fig add their green silence to the marble's white logic. You teach as you were taught, the names and dates of festivals, the taboos that hover like invisible guards around your every action, why iron must not touch certain vessels, why thresholds must be kept clearer than consciences. You explain again the way the inner sanctuary stores not just objects but the city's luck, the palladium and other sacra kept in the place even your lictor has never seen. You overlay this instruction with stories, because without stories all rule becomes bone without flesh. You tell them how the donkey's bray once saved Vesta from a god's crude intention, how the animal, blessed for its clamor, still gets garlands when Vestalia comes. You tell them how the goddess is both fire and quiet, warmth and shape, a presence that is less a face than a feeling of home made public. You watch their eyes widen. You hope they understand that even fear, held properly, is a kind of respect. As the light tilts, a messenger in tidy sandals arrives with an inquiry not meant for the street. People come to you not only for blessings but for safekeeping. While you cannot speak of what is stored with you, you know the shape of it. Sealed tablets tucked away under divine oversight, the last wishes of men whose names are spoken on the highest steps, a practice old enough that history itself seems to nod in approval. The ritual of taking possession is precise but not dramatic, the kind of careful handling that says this is not earth or coin but a line between future and past. Though the broader world thinks of you as firekeepers, you know that your true work is the maintenance of boundaries, the keeping in and the keeping out, the lines in which a city draws itself so that it can believe it will last beyond any of its individuals, either ones who sit on gilded chairs and stamp their feet in stadiums until the world comes to heel. On certain days in certain seasons you would open the inner space to matrons. You would let the city's women cross a line that is normally yours alone, their feet careful, their faces lit with the tremor of approaching a place that cannot be described without loss. But today is not that day. Instead, the evening folds around your duties like the final edge of a blanket. You make a small circuit of the house to check that lamps are trimmed and cloaks are stored. You ensure the novices do not borrow the easy chatter of ordinary girls to cover their nerves. Your voice can be kind as well as strict. You know that fear left unbraced becomes panic. While panic is a word that belongs to wild places, it can find its way into marble houses if no one tends the quiet the way you tend the flame. As the sun slides behind the Palatine, the city becomes a collection of dark shapes with bright mouths where taverns spill laughter into the cooling air. You take your evening meal with your sisters, simple food taken without greed and with the kind of conversation that allows for both silence and softness. Sometimes you talk about the games or the oddity of some senator's sandals, or the way a rainstorm changed the forum into a lake of bronze reflections. But more often you talk about the small triumphs of the day, an apprentice who corrected her own grip, a flame that needed only the barest nudge to keep its shape. You let the bond between you hum like a string plucked very lightly. You are alone together in a way few understand. A handful of women woven into the city's fabric so tightly that if one thread were cut the pattern might buckle. You accept that closeness with gratitude. It is the only one you are permitted, and sometimes the only one you desire. Twilight deepens, and with it the boundaries of the world change. The edges of buildings melt into the kind of shadows that make even familiar corners look like mysteries. You step once more into the round temple for the evening tending. You feel again that little alteration in the air that says you have crossed into a place that eats sound and gives back thought. You kneel with the grace of repetition. You listen to the wood's soft complaint as it settles, to the small language of flame that hiss and tick and whisper like a child who cannot yet make words but can tell you everything anyway. You think, as you often do, that life is made of modest constants, 2 loaves left to cool on a windowsill, a woman unfolding a shawl, the way a hand knows the shape of a familiar cup. Rome, which loves triumph and spectacle, is actually kept alive by modest constants like yours, a fact that gives you both courage and a very private smile. When the sky is a blue so deep it could almost be black, and the first stars are uncertain in their places, you take your turn in the sequence that moves the watches through the night. The fire does not sleep, and neither does your responsibility. Sometimes your mind goes to the city outside your walls, to men in cloaks gambling by lamplight, to mothers whispering to babies whose bellies are full for once, to a soldier on leave looking at the moon and thinking of a town far away where the river is quieter and the grass is softer. You feel the stretch of your life across all those unseen others, like a web that catches and holds without entangling. You wonder whether, when your 30 years have passed and your vow is done, you will step into marriage and a new household. or remain here as a woman who has no need to trade certainty for a different kind of promise. You have watched older sisters choose both paths. Each walk looks brave from where you stand. Even in stillness, Rome sends you signals. A distant cheer from an inn when a story reaches its punchline. The clatter of a mule stumbling and righting itself. The gleam of torches gathering and dispersing like migrating birds. You acknowledge these with the portion of your mind that is audience, while the rest holds the posture of a priestess. You make small adjustments to the fire's food. You ensure that ash is arranged so heat can breathe, that the living heart of the city hearth is never smothered by yesterday's remnants. It is an act that always feels like instruction shut inside metaphors. You see in it the way institutions are strangled by the very traditions they think sustain them. If someone does not keep space for flame, you love that your hands, which seem to strangers so gentle, are actually hands that know how to move old things aside to keep the core alive. Midnight arrives not like a sound but like an agreement. The watch turns. You hand to your sister the simple inventory of what she must do and what she should watch for. The way the draft has shifted since the evening. The confidence of the ember pile. The small irregularities in a novice's nerves. You return to the house through the kind of quiet that is not absence but presence. You pass the statues in the courtyard whose eyes follow no one. They have seen too much to bother anymore. Your body is tired in the honest way that makes sleep feel like a friend waiting behind a curtain. You undress with movements that are almost ceremonial. Every layer of your clothing has meaning and must be put aside with respect. You climb onto your couch with the taste of smoke and the memory of light on your tongue. You let your eyes close with the last thought of the morning to come. You sleep not as a woman who has finished something, but as a woman who is part of something that never finishes. In dreams, sometimes you are 6 again. The floor is too big. The pontiff's hand is too heavy. The door is too bright. Sometimes you are 60, and your hair is grey, and your hands tremble when you lift the veil. Sometimes you are neither, only flame, a language of motion and heat, of devouring that is not destruction but offering. You wake with a little jolt, as if you have been called by name. The world is still dark enough to feel secret, quiet enough that you can hear your own breath. You sit up into another day that looks like the one before it. You find pleasure and purpose in repeating what you have repeated. Repetition is not dullness but depth. You think of Rome outside, rolling its shoulders into the morning. You think of the year beyond your walls, of Trajan's world-shaping ambitions, of builders measuring stone, of soldiers writing letters on wax tablets under awnings while rain taps the canvas. You feel your work like a steady hand on the city's chest, telling it breathe in, breathe out, breathe in. Dawn comes again as it always does, painting the sky with the faint wash of a city's blush before it puts on its face. You rise before the paint has dried. You do the same sequence you did yesterday and will do tomorrow, but you do it today as if it were the first and last time. Sacred work hates both boredom and bravado. You carry the tools that are not yours but the goddess's. You correct a novice's posture with a touch that is kinder than the words you would have used even a year ago. You step into the round temple where the fire holds its own sunrise in its basin. When you kneel, you feel in your joints the age of the office, not the age of your body. You whisper the old words and add to them an unspoken pair of sentences that you offer to yourself. Be true, be tender. You have learned that duty without tenderness becomes stone. Tenderness without duty becomes ash. You guard your heart against both. The world outside will tell stories of you, that your word can halt a procession to death, that your seat at the circus is higher than most, that your veil is as bright as winter sun on marble, that you are the city's daughter and mother at once. Some of those stories will be true, and some will be embroidery. It will not matter. What matters is that when the embers settle and the air grows still and the temple seems to hold its breath, you are there, breathing for it, and with it, keeping the circle unbroken and the flame unshaken. You will pass this exactness to others, hands to hands, eyes to eyes, a chain that reaches backward into time's dim corridor and forward beyond your imagining. One day, when you are free to choose another life, you will carry with you the knowledge that you once held the city's pulse between your palms and did not drop it. That knowledge will sit in you like a secret sun, warming even the years when the world forgets your name. When the last check of the morning is done and your sister takes the post and the novices set about their small plain chores, you stand at the threshold of the temple. You look out at the forum beginning its full volume day. You watch the light catch edges and coins and rings and eyes. You allow yourself one long breath of this view, the way a painter might pause at the edge of a completed work, not to correct it, but to remember that they were there when it became itself. You step back across the line into the space where women keep civilization from turning into mere spectacle. You know with the quiet certainty that has taken years to earn, something fundamental. Though they say the legions make Rome's borders and the emperors fill its histories, the city would be a carcass without its hearth. The hearth would be cold without you. That is not pride but simply a measure of weight and balance, like a scale settling into equilibrium, like a fire settling into its own logic. So you go on as the day does. You break bread, you teach, you mend, you tend, you keep the list of what must be done short, and the list of what must be remembered long. You answer the messenger's formal nods with the right kind of answer. You move past the gossip that clings like smoke to public squares. You slip back into the sweetness of work that is watched over by gods who prefer order to theatre. When the hour comes again, you are back at the hearth. The circle closes and opens and closes again. You, sworn at 6, honored and observed, restrained and empowered, mothered by a goddess and orphaned of yourself in a way that few would understand, hold the line. You hold the light. In the holding, you become not just a woman of Rome but Rome itself, alive, warm, resolute, and eternal as long as the flame stays awake.